Welcome to the Page Turners podcast. I'm your host, Rob Roy McCandless, and with me, as always, is
Kari Cooper.
Kari Cooper. And tonight we have a very special guest, the man, the myth, the medicated, Eric Lahti. Eric grew up looking for UFOs and buried treasure in northwest New Mexico. Unfortunately, he never found either of them, but he did get some good stories. Currently works as a programmer, database admin, sysadmin, and a whole host of other things. But most importantly for us is that he is an acclaimed author. He wrote the books, Henchmen, Arise, Transmute, The Clockman, Saxton Chronicles, and most recently, and my favorite, Roadside Attractions.
Roadside Attractions. Did say Roadside Attractions?
I'm getting there. Mr. Lahti, it's good to be with you. Yeah.
Ah, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, hey, anytime. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so I need to know because I've recently discovered you. Yay me. And I need to know, what's the deal with searching for treasure in UFOs?
That is actually something that I did when I was growing up. My mom knew a guy who had been a treasure hunter. And he knew of some stories that there was treasure up out in the Badlands of northwestern New Mexico. And so we would go out every now and then and look for treasure and look for UFOs at the same time.
What was the process? What was the process of looking for treasure?
This guy that my mom knew he'd been doing this for like decades. He was actually a legit treasure hunter and had actually found fairly large caches at some point in the past.
Wow.
And so he knew all this history and he knew all of the people up in the area, and he had maps and scratchings and stuff that people had left him. But, in the Badlands, there's no real way you can map it other than to say it's kind of here-ish.
Yeah.
And so we would go out and one of the big caches that they were looking for was supposedly like 9 tons of gold that had gotten picked up and left out in the middle of nowhere. And now that people know about it, I'm sure everybody's going to be up there. But so we would go out with metal detectors and just scan around. The guy my mom knew actually knew roughly where this guy had lived, and we found this thing that he had carved out. There was like this big column of sandstone just like out ass end of nowhere, and he had basically turned it into his home. And you could see places on the sandstone where he'd carved out places to hang curtain rods so that he could have curtains up, and he'd turn it into his house. And so we started looking around in that area, but we never did really actually find anything.
Wow.
Yeah,
what about UFOs?
Up in that part of the country, they're not really like an everyday thing, but it wasn't uncommon to see random lights that would follow you in the skies and stuff like that.
Well, you're in New Mexico. Isn't that where Roswell is?
Yeah, it sure is.
Farmington is way...
So are you near Roswell?
No.
Okay.
No, they're total ass and opposites of New Mexico.
Okay.
Like that's a lot of ground in between them. But if you're in a UFO, right, Eric? I assume
I was just gonna say I thought they had like sonic super speed. Speed, Rob, light speed.
You're right.
Speed limits apply to them, actually.
Really?
Get pulled over by local law enforcement.
Son, do you know how fast you were going?
You're not from around here, are you?
That sounds like an interesting upbringing. And so you say that inspired you to write.
It definitely gave some of the stories. The ultimate inspiration was got back in 2014 or so, right before I released Henchmen. I was sitting there and I was playing Saints Row 3 for like the 4th time. And I was like, man, I got to do something with my life. And so I started writing a book. And I think I knocked out Henchmen in like 4 months.
Wow.
And it just kind of spiraled from there.
Okay, and then tell us about that spiral. So how did you go from playing a video game to becoming a published author? What was that journey like?
That was a long process. And really what it was is I was sitting there and it was hot as balls in Albuquerque that week. And I was just frustrated and decided that kind of fed up with my job and frustrated with the way things were going. So I just started writing. And I think I got about 6 pages out. And I handed them to my wife and then disappeared into my office. while she read that. And when she didn't come back and say, "Don't quit your day job," I thought, well, maybe I should continue doing this. And so the 6 pages that she read actually don't even exist anymore. I
Well,
moved
of course
a long
not.
time
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So
that's how it was.
And so then, and now I know that you have been published, not self-published, but published by a publisher. How was the journey from the first 6 pages to finding a publisher? How did that go for you? Did you, so, obviously you have to go through, you've written your book to the best of your ability, edited 1,000 times. What was the next step?
For the longest time, I was actually adamantly opposed to going through a publisher. And I figured if I can self-publish this thing, why would I share my money with someone else?
Right.
And I actually wound up meeting Sam and BK on Twitter. And they were looking for someone to write a short story for the Halloween special a few years ago. And so I wrote one up and I submitted it, and it got published by him. And then at that point, I hadn't started Roadside Attractions, but the story that I submitted to them kind of became the kickoff point for it. And there's actually a lot of similarities to them. So when I started working on Roadside Attractions and I kept in contact with them, I finally got it done, and I was like, you know what, maybe I should try this, at least send it out and see what it would be like to get it published. So I did, and they picked it up, and about 2 years later, it got released.
Wow.
That's the whole story.
So you sent it to a publisher or an agent?
Directly to the owner of the publishing company through Kyanite.
Wow. So there you have it, listeners. Like, you can, there's lots of different ways to become published. I mean, because some people go through the agent avenue and they search for that agent that's willing to take them on. And then some of them, and then like your story there. So that's, a great example. I personally, so I'm reading Roadside Attractions, and I absolutely love it. And I can't wait for the television show. I got to say, I see it as clearly as a television show. And I was so I started reading Roadside, and I fell in love with Janine. And I know, and she's very, on paper, she's not very likable, but there's something just so likable about her. She's just like a spark,
Right.
And I feel like she's one of those girls that, no matter, she just, I don't want to ruin the story, but at the same time, I want to talk to death about the story. So I'm going to try to, meet in the middle here. But I love that character. You've got 2 fabulous female characters. And so congratulations on being a man and being able to write such great female characters. I lucked out because you're both actually just nail female characters. And that's really nice to see, because not a lot of male writers do that. And I love Shar and Jordan's story as well. I just see them so clearly, and I just can't wait for that show to be on every Thursday night.
Me too.
Has to be Thursday. And I'd love to see, and no pressure, but I'd love to see just continued stories about Shar and Jordan, because I could just read their banter for days. It's very, I was saying to Rob earlier, just very reminiscent of Elmer Leonard, just the snappy dialogue, and it's hilarious. You've got such a great sense of humor that your humor really shines through the page. Sorry, I'm not even letting him talk, Rob. How did you come up with the idea for, having a scientist and a witch join forces and sort of go on this cross country ghost spree?
We used to watch, well, not really but my son would occasionally watch the ghost hunting shows.
Okay.
And, it was the guy with the way too tight polo shirt that would, a ton of necklaces, and he's flexing all over the place, and come get us. And I always thought,
not Zach Bagans.
Yeah, I don't remember what his name was, but I always thought it would be hilarious if something did come get him and just smack the snot out of him. And so that was kind of the kickoff point for Roadside. Well, that and the fact that the terror that we have here is actually based on The Thing, which is down along I-10 between Tucson and Las Cruces.
Oh, that's what it was. I knew it wasn't the terror, but I could not remember what it was. Okay. Sorry. Because that's one of that's the actual coming attraction kind of thing, right? That's
right.
That's where they all end up, and all kinds of stuff happens. So not to give it away, but yeah, that's the thing. So okay.
Yeah, I just thought the concept, and I just, like I said, I don't want to ruin the story, but the concept of the attraction, I guess I can say that without ruining the story, just blew me away.
Yeah.
Like who that is, who that's supposed to be, and like why she's there, and then like there's just so many interesting characters, and like the one, like the stranger, I don't want to ruin it because it's just so great. But can I tell you, for anybody who's listening, if you're a fan of Supernatural, even Supernatural never did anything like this. Like I said, I want to see this show on Thursday nights, 8 p.m. Pacific time.
Yeah.
That's a good time for me.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to ask Eric where you got your concept of hell and demons from.
Yeah.
I just kind of made that up as I went along. I don't know. I was looking at, a lot of the traditional models of it's a place of eternal punishment, and I always kind of thought, well, why would it be a place of eternal punishment for humans? I mean, it seems like, you got kicked out of heaven. It should be the punishment for those guys, not necessarily the rest of everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the springboard for it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I would actually kind of like to develop a little further. But, there just wasn't room in here to really explain the whole history of hell and what it's like to live there and blah, blah, blah.
You've touched on demons before, and I think it's in the Clockman, your short story anthology, where you talked about them as programs. Is that right?
I don't remember exactly what I wrote in the Clockman. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I haven't read it since then.
Obviously, it stuck with me. I really grooved on that, especially the titular story, the Clockman, because of course I write steampunk, and I was like, man, this is some good stuff here. So clearly, it affected me. I was like, oh yeah, this totally resonates.
Yeah, that was my little love letter to steampunk and kung fu movies.
Yep. That was awesome. It's really great stuff. If you get a chance, you should. Like I sound like the that Saturday Night Live character. That was so great, man.
We always say that. We're always like, it was great. It was great.
It was so
like,
great.
We have to buy, for writers, we have to get some thesauruses, Rob, and then
or something.
Yeah.
So all we do is like, do you remember when you wrote that?
So Eric, tell us what a typical writing day is for you. Do you write, like, what are your writing habits?
I usually write at night after everybody's gone to bed, and I really only spend about an hour a night anymore, unless I really get on tear. But, everything's nice and quiet, and I'll just sit down and take off with whatever I happen to be working on and just start writing. I've actually only recently started over the past few days of getting back into seriously writing, because I was actually going through and editing the most recent work. It's called Broken Heroes. And that just it was one of those books that I know that there's something really good there, but I'm having the damnedest time bringing it out. And so I went through it 3 or 4 times, editing and fixing, and then I'll probably need to go through it another few times to pull whatever it is that I'm looking for out of there. But I started writing a short story recently, and that was kind of nice to put the editing aside and actually start writing again.
So Eric, when you do your writing process, do you edit until you feel it's ready to be seen, or do you engage your your advanced readers, your beta readers at some point when you're just like, look, I can't see it anymore, I can't look at it anymore?
It doesn't go out to anybody until I'm pretty much convinced that it's ready to go. So I mean, it'll be the whole book done, and as edited as I'm going to get it on my own, and as solid as I'm going to get it before I push it out there.
Right.
And when you're writing, do you do a first draft or bust, or do you get stuck and then go back and edit? Do you write, chapter to chapter to chapter, or do you jump around? What's your writing process like?
I tend to be almost linear, but then if every now and then I'll get stuck on something, I'll just move further on in the book and then start writing something else there. And that's one of the reasons I don't give it out to beta readers until it's done, because it would make zero sense.
Right.
How do we go from point A to point Z over here?
Yeah.
Because I got stuck on point B and needed to move on to something else.
And do you prepare? Like, because I know some writers are heavily into plotting, and they write, they do outlines and chapter outlines. What's your process?
I usually just start writing and hope for the best. It's very much fly by the seat of my pants.
You just throw it out to the universe.
Yeah. I have a basic idea of how it's going to start and how it's going to end. And then as I'm going along, the middle usually reveals itself.
And I mean, your characters are very definitive. They're all very different, and they have very distinct personalities. How do you manage that? Do you do character sketches? Or do you just keep it all in your head, or do you have note cards? I mean, there's several different processes. What are yours?
I tend to just start writing them, and I kind of get an idea in my head of somebody that I've known in the past that may not be exactly like that, but there will be some little spark of that personality that I pull through and push into the character.
Okay, so you base them on like people that you've known or met, or that's
Yeah.
interesting, eh, Rob? That's really interesting.
No, we like Eric and I write together, but because I know him, we went to college together and we were roommates
Right.
for a couple of years, and so because I know him, like some of the characters, I'm like, oh my god, that's this person. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I know, or that person. I know somebody who said something like that one time when we were out, whatever, kicking over cows or something, and and I. And because Eric is a character, like Eric ended up in one of my books, or
Oh,
actually a series of
wow.
my books too, and not exactly Eric, of course, but like the better Eric.
Well, you better hope he doesn't put you in his books, because they're filled with demons and bad people. Oh, I based this guy on Rob. He's just gonna unzip himself, and now he's got horns.
That'd be all right.
I
I'd be
don't
okay with
recognize
that.
that guy.
I'd be okay with that.
Speaking of which, clearly Roadside Attractions has some research, because there's some things in there like the Dance Rue Macabre reference to the grimoire. What kind of research did you do for this book?
Directly for the book, actually, not a whole lot. I had read the Satanic Bible a number of years ago, and it was interesting. I don't know that I would necessarily recommend you go out of your way to find a copy, but
I actually went to the Satanic Temple in Salem, Massachusetts last year.
I've heard that the
So-
people are really nice, actually.
They are, but of course they have to be. That's how they get you.
That's how I get you.
Well, I mean, okay, look. It's funny. I had this discussion last week. If
All
you
right.
read the Satanic Tenets,
Mm-hmm.
have you read them? Well, you read the Satanic
Mhm.
Bible. You know what they say.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're very misleading.
It's just it's fancy humanism, basically.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is. And then and it. I mean, yeah. They are, the Satanic Temple people are very, very nice. It's more of an art gallery than anything. There's a huge statue of Baphomet,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like a goat. I have goats, so I'm like, whatever. They're a pain in the ass.
Is that the traveling statue? Is that the one that they'll travel around?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so. I think that one stays
That one's there.
in the
Okay.
temple, yeah, because and it's not really like the Satanic Temple. It just looks like a house on a street, really. It's kind of on a side street, not in a really busy area. Which I expect they probably had trouble renting a place. But they, I didn't really get a lot of like bad vibes or good vibes or anything. You didn't walk in and think, oh, this place is satanic. It's got a lot of art, and it's got a lot of very high quality art. The pictures are, some of them are kind of gruesome, but
Well, I'll
Yeah.
run this past Eric. So I write urban fantasy as well, and I've delved into the whole demons and Satan himself and whatnot.
Yeah.
I find there seem to be like two kinds of Satanists. There's the guys who like to wear robes and burn black candles and pretend they're doing something magical, and really they're not.
that
And
can be also a Catholic priest. But go
Right,
on.
like a Catholic priest, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's a larger, kind of this, like you said, fancy humanist, where they're trying to make a point about religion and our adherence to it. And if you say that your faith is insoluble and everything, and it can't be moved, then my faith could be the same way, except we're on the other side of your coin, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And that I don't know if you've run into the same thing, Eric.
I have I've noticed very similar things, yeah. And the interesting thing, and I haven't really interacted with a whole lot of Satanists because it's New Mexico. There aren't a whole lot with hippies.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they tend to actually be atheists.
Right.
Yes.
And, as far as they're concerned, they're looking at Satanism as, was it the adversary? And so the
Yeah.
adversary to religion is no religion.
Right.
But I do find it interesting that, people bring up the statue of Baphomet all along. And the history on that is kind of interesting because it predates a lot of stuff. And it was actually just written as, or designed originally as a study in balance. And so you've got the animal and the human, the male and the female. And there's a lot of symbology built into that thing, but it was never intended to be Satan. But interestingly enough, the Knights Templar were accused of worshiping it, and they're like, "What? No, that's not that." But that's how it all came to pass. It was just there was some guy who drew it out.
That's interesting. That's a very Dan Brown kind of a moment for us. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. It would, of course, they would. They would be all about the balance, right? Okay,
Yep.
yeah, that's very cool.
Well, I think Satanists are different from devil worshippers. Like, I think that the kind of people that you're writing about in the Roadside Attractions, they are more like on the devil worship side. Because I don't know. Yeah, like I don't know that Satanists get together and like sacrifice people, and they just didn't seem that type.
No, and some of that was based on the satanic panic in the 80s and 90s. And,
right.
Living in small town America at that point, I mean, we were absolutely convinced that there were people out there dancing around bonfires in goatskin pants. And there probably were because they didn't have anything else to do. But whether or not they accomplished anything is, that's up in the air.
I think Chick Tracks had a lot to do with that whole feeding into the idea of there are these real Satanists and they really will sacrifice you, and D&D will draw you in,
and heavy metal.
Heavy metal.
Just call it heavy devil.
Yeah, heavy AC/DC, right?
I love heavy metal, and I love Iron Maiden. I just went to
you're a heavy metal girl. You are hardcore. You've met some. Yeah, you are hardcore. I know that you've met a bunch of heavy metal rockers. And,
no, not at all. I never met any. I just went to the show.
Don't they come up and talk to you and whatnot?
No.
I've seen pictures with you, and I have no idea who now, but I remember I was like,
Eugene Hoots. Yeah, that's Eugene Hoots from Gogo Bordello. He's my favorite singer in the world. He's a Ukrainian punk.
There you go.
Gogo Bordello is pretty awesome.
Pardon?
Gogo Bordello is pretty awesome.
My God. They're like, you're a Gogo Bordello fan? Eric, you're my new best friend. I love Gogo Bordello. They're my favorite band, and Eugene Hoots is amazing. And yeah, so have you seen them live, Eric?
I have not. I actually haven't been to a concert in quite a while, but my wife used to work in the concert industry, and she helped do advertising for the shows, and so she got to go backstage and meet everybody. And so she got to meet Judas Priest and ZZ Top and Kiss and everybody that came through.
Wow.
And their stage appearance is apparently so much different. She said that Rob Halford from Judas Priest was like this perfect English gentleman. And you would not have gotten that from listening to their music or, seeing him or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only one who's exactly like his persona is Diamond Dave, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think he really is exactly who he portrays himself as.
Apparently, Gene Simmons also is exactly what I think he's going to be.
You're like, oh yeah, there he is, Gene Simmons. No, you guys could talk music forever. Eric used to run the music column at our school paper, and so he'd get all the free music.
Oh, wow. So you've been writing that long. Back to Eric's writing career. Sorry, great segue, Rob. That was my next question. How long have you been writing?
I think it was about 2014 or 2015 that I started and never really stopped. So, yeah, I wrote a column for the paper, but that was, good Lord, 97 or something like that. And then I didn't touch it for almost 20 years.
Well, that's okay. That's still writing. So what kind of free music did you get back in 97?
We got whatever
just trying to think
labels decided was going to be popular.
Right.
And so we got some just absolute crap.
Yeah.
And we got a few good ones, and I don't remember right offhand. It's like no bands that you've ever even heard of. They were real.
I thought you got one of the early Prince, or not early, but one of those Prince albums from around that time when he was doing the cymbal thing.
No, I don't think I did.
Okay.
That would have actually been kind of cool. trying to remember who all we got. I remember we got Civ, and God, those guys were terrible.
I've never even heard of them.
Nothing But the Girl. I think I got their first album.
Oh,
yeah.
They had a good song. I remember that. I'm a '90s person myself. I know everybody always says I look young, but I'm a lot older than I look. So that was, I mean, the '90s, the '80s wasn't bad for music. Now, like going retro, I'll listen to Cyndi Lauper and Boy George and Duran Duran and think about being 10 years old and, because that's what but then they had the grunge movement, which kind of saved rock and roll.
Yeah, hair metal had gotten pretty out of hand towards the end of the 80s.
Yeah.
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 But then you go back and listen to it, and some of it's good. Like, Def Leppard's good, and there's some White Snake and in there. That's not bad.
Maiden, of course.
Oh my God! Don't even go there. Okay, they've never been bad. They've never been that. We're not even classifying. Maiden is in another group altogether. Bruce Dickinson's got one of the best voices in rock and roll. I don't care what anybody says, and he's still got it.
Who's going to argue with you? I'm not.
I noticed the silence. What are you going to say?
Right. What are you going to say to that?
He is the human air raid siren.
He is. He's fantastic. So, Eric, what projects are you working now, and do you have any plans for the future books? What are you working on now?
Right now, I'm actually just writing a short story. I finished up 2 since I finished Roadside Attractions. One was Better Than Dead, which is about a guy who's a gunslinger, and he lives in this city that's only just called the city, and people are dying and then coming back to life and doing crimes and then dying again, and so he winds up getting chased through the city with a vampire that's helping him, and they're trying to figure out just exactly what the hell is going on, and that actually turns out to be a fun story. I'm looking for a publisher for that one. And then Broken Heroes, which is about a couple of people that get trapped in a small town up in New Mexico, where the government is actually playing around with Nazi magic. And so something goes seriously wrong, and they wind up getting stuck there, just like frozen in time for almost 70 years. And when they come out, they're essentially superheroes, but they have absolutely no idea what to do. And there's no one there to guide them. And so they kind of fall back into their original personas of one guy is still basically fighting World War II in his head. And then the girl had been just, this general all-time party girl. And she wakes up and it's 2019 and it's like, whoa, what the hell happened to my life? It's all gone. And so it's dealing with how do they handle suddenly having basically godlike powers, and also everybody they know is gone.
You seem to have a recurring theme where Party Girl gets redemption, and I really like that. No, I really like that. As an ex-Party Girl, I really like that. No, I'm just kidding. They're a party freak, but, like some wine on a Friday night. But so I like that. I sort of like that bad girl gets redemption. There's not enough of that. It's always the bad girl ends up dead in the alleyway, which I guess also happened in your book. But
well, it's subverting the trope, right? I mean, that's a very Buffy, kind of concept of here's the trope, right? The blonde is going to run screaming, trip, fall, and the very slow walking killer will get her. And instead of that, we have Eric Lahti writing, well, no, she can get up.
Yeah.
she can kick off the high heels. Yeah, she can find a stick and eat
she's
some
gonna
ass.
chug a beer.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, what do you got planned for the future, though, Eric? You didn't tell us that. You said you were writing on now, but do you have any more ideas coming out?
At some point, I need to finish off the Henchmen series. There's one book left in that. And that is, I'm still trying to figure out exactly how I'm going to pull everything together, because it started out with, 4 characters, and now there's, 10 or 11 of them. And so to keep it in that same first-person style is getting kind of tricky. And plus, I got to figure out exactly how I want to wrap the whole thing up. Well, actually, I know exactly how I'm going to wrap it up, but I need to know how to get to that point.
How to get there, yeah. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but Henchmen originally was just kind of a standalone, right?
It was originally intended to be just a standalone. That's why at the end, everybody just walks away.
Right.
And I kind of wanted that whole, like, we're done, let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
And then Arise just came up as an odd little story that popped up in my head, and I hadn't even really thought about it. And then I think it was over Christmas break. You know, it's been 4 or 5 months since I'd even looked at that book. I started writing and it came out.
And I'm just curious, which one of your Henchmen series do you prefer?
You know, there's a lot of raw energy out of the first one that
Yep.
I still try to capture. And I don't know that I've ever successfully recaptured that. So that one was fun. And then as the plot started to get bigger and bigger, it gets harder to tighten everything up. So Henchmen is really still my favorite of the 3 out there. So I'm hoping to end it on a bang and try and get that energy back into it.
I like all of them. Just for the record, I think they're all fantastic. But I tend to agree. I think Henchmen, it really is the tightest, even though you have a very freshman feel to some of the writing. Like I feel you've grown a lot as a writer, but Henchmen just kind of has this pace that just grabs you and you just go. And there's some really interesting mysteries that you've wrapped in there that you don't necessarily reveal. You don't reveal some of them throughout the entire series. It's like it's just never going to happen.
Right. And, you know, that's based on the idea that there's just some stuff you ain't going to know.
Right.
And there was a book, I don't know if you ever read it, it was called Ship of Fools. And it was about some deep space exploration ship that had been out there so long they forgot what the hell they were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And they come across a colony that's just been slaughtered. And then they come across another ship where everybody has been slaughtered. And you never figure out exactly who did it or why. It was just aliens showed up and destroyed them. And then the aliens finally found the ship and they started to come in. And you never once see them. You just know that they are not nice people to be around. And so that's like pretty much the whole story, is that you're going to come across stuff that there is no explanation for.
Right.
Those guys are dicks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people are just a vessel for an engine for the story too, right?
Right.
Not everybody has to have a meaning. One of the things that I noticed about your writing is that there were a lot of quotable quotes, and I know that's kind of Jeopardy sounding, but there were a lot of phrases and sentences that really struck me as just being amazing. Like this one here that I actually went through and I highlight some of the stuff I really like time had been kind to her so far, but the world that told men they'd never grow old was the same one that told women they were already too old.
Already too old.
Oh, but you know what I mean? But that, I was just like, yes.
It's actually a Rob line. He said that once.
No way.
Shut up. Did
No,
I?
Yeah, you did it back in the day.
I was like, I wish I'd said that because that's an awesome line.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious. Yeah.
Oh, Rob,
Well, alrighty then. now I'm all blushy here.
that's amazing. See, Rob's like a chick. Rob's like one of the girls. So that doesn't surprise me. He totally understands.
Usually only the stupid things I say get in books.
Well,
Oh, I'm all readier now. Yeah.
but
Thank you. I'm honored.
yeah, that's amazing. What an amazing thing to say, Rob. I'm so glad you're my co-host.
There we go. That's why I'm here. Say things I don't remember.
I don't remember being that awesome, but okay.
Yeah. Every now and then stuff comes out.
But
To be fair, he was probably drunk at the time.
This is true. Some of my better stuff is.
Or like trying to get some, right?
That is always true. Yes. There's never a time that wasn't true. So yes.
But another thing I noticed that there were just all these fantastic sentences. Like here's one from page 13. Something about being dead made her brave. Abaddon's chuckle rippled the sand. So I mean, there's a lot of these great sentences in here, and they say that every book is a lesson for a writer. And so, what are some of your favorite writers?
I like Hunter S. Thompson, but I think everybody likes Hunter S. Thompson.
Well,
now I got to look at my bookshelf because I'm terrible with names. Charles Stross is one of my favorites. Ken MacLeod, Vonnegut, Heinlein. A lot of sci-fi writers, actually.
You introduced me to Tim Powers.
Oh, yeah, Tim Powers is awesome.
Yeah. And from Tim Powers, that's how I kind of got into steampunk. Not that I wasn't halfway there already, but that's how I got to Jeter and shoot, his name is gonna Homunculus, the Homunculus author. I can't get there.
Yeah, I know.
Blaylock. Blaylock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but Eric sent me Tim Powers' book, and I'm like, oh man, this guy writes so well. And they were. Go ahead.
Was that Last Call that I sent you?
Yes, it was Last Call. Yeah.
God, I love that book.
Yeah, it's just an incredible book. It's a Las Vegas kind of urban magic book. Really good stuff. And I'm like, oh, this guy's a great writer. Let me see what else he's got. And it turns out he's one of the founders of the steampunk movement, and all three of those guys studied under Philip K. Dick.
Oh, wow.
Right? What a pedigree.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
That's amazing.
Anyhow, sorry, Eric. Go on about more authors that you like.
That's all I can think of right offhand.
That's fair.
That's fair. But you don't really seem to write. Do you write a lot of science fiction?
I have not. I've got an idea kicking around in my head that it's a science fiction Lovecraft mythos kind of crossover that I think will be a lot of fun when I get around to start writing it.
Okay. Now, what about so I'm going to kind of take us in a different direction here. You're a martial artist as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So can you tell us a bit about that?
I have been studying American Kenpo for 20 years.
Wow.
And, well, off and on for 20 years. So I got through my second degree black belt, and I decided I needed a break. And so I took about a year. This was right about the time my son was born. So I took off a year and studied Kenjutsu, which is sword fighting, for a little while. And that got to be too much of a time suck. I mean, I was gone like half the day on Saturdays. So I went back to Kenpo, and I was about 6 months off from getting my third black. And this was, I think, 12 years ago. And at that point, my son was about 2, and I went to our head instructor and I said, look, I know at the black belt test we're supposed to spend the whole weekend there, including spending the night in the gym and all that other stuff. Can I just go home? Because I got a 2-year-old that doesn't sleep very well. And he was like, nope. And I said, well, then I'm not testing. And I ultimately walked out of the school for, 4 or 5 years probably. But when Kenneth was old enough, I took him back there, and he started studying it, and I started teaching it. And then that school went out of business because our teacher was getting up there in age, and he was having some health problems. So he shut it down, and we wound up going to the other Kenpo school in town. And I actually started studying as the system and getting ready to test again. So due to COVID, that kind of changed things. But he and I were both supposed to be testing for his junior third black and my adult third black here in December. I don't know how well that's going to work out now, though. So it may be pushed off till June.
That's awesome. I got to ask though, do any of your high school enemies come back and fight you for control of the city for its students?
No, but there's a couple of them I wouldn't mind hunting down and introducing them to the mystical arts of Kenpo.
That's awesome.
Well, so I guess that's why your fight scenes are so good too.
Yeah, we've done, obviously a lot of study and a lot of practice and a lot of sparring. But my current teacher actually has been a bodyguard and a bouncer, and he's got all these crazy stories about, I had to headbutt this guy in the nose this one time, and it's kind of a trip listening to him because he's the most peaceful kind of hippie dude in the world. But then, you find out that at one of his old schools, I guess somebody got out of line and he put his head through a wall.
Wow.
At what point, what level do you have to be where they teach you to rip a man's throat out?
Oh, that's gold belt stuff, man.
That's early.
Oh yeah, it's the first thing you learn.
You
like
get
your first day.
Yeah, that's like it took Swayze years, and really that reflects how poor of a student he was, right?
He was very floppy.
Yeah. Well, with that hair, right? Like there's a lot of effort into the hair, so you got to balance the two. No, I really do love your fight scenes. I take a lot from them. I've always wanted to ask this because I get this sense from when you're writing them. I wondered if you were also a fan of the show Burn Notice.
I have never seen Burn Notice.
Oh, that's crazy because I totally get a Burn Notice vibe from your. Oh, that's crazy. So I just love how you're like, some people think this and this is why they think that, but really this is the case and here's all the reasons. And that's kind of like Burn Notice seems to have big sections where the lead goes into those moments, and I'm like, I wonder if he's a huge fan. Turns out he's not. You're just original like that. So
no, I have heard of it, but I have never actually seen it.
That's awesome though. I've always wondered that. So
No,
all right,
great.
Now I know.
They're great, and your writing's great. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. But
let's give him a quick plug again. Eric Lahti. Where can you be found, Eric?
I can be found all over the place. I'm on Twitter as Eric Lahti1, and I've got a Facebook page that I can't remember the URL to right now because I got it bookmarked. And I've got a ericlahti.com website, and there's probably some other stuff that I'm missing, but those are the biggies.
And it's ericlahti.com. I got that right?
Yippers.
Oh, look at that.
And we'll provide a link for our readers, for everybody listening, to his books. Definitely pick up any one of his books. I personally recommend Roadside Attractions. Rob, I believe his favorite was The Henchmen.
Yeah.
But anything that you read by Mr. Lahti is definitely worth it. It's fantastic work, and we thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thank you guys for having me. It was fun.
Very grateful. It was great. And until next time, listeners, read lots of books.
We're serious.
Or else.
Or Rob's going to rip your throat out. Good night.
Good night.